Hey guys, PC here, and today we're back again with another series from the DPP Invitational play-ins. Today we have george182 versus Violet River. George182 is a real old-school DPP player. He's somebody who has been around for, I would say almost like 17 years now. He was on my SPL team when like SPL 5, which was 2013. So you get an idea of how long he's been around. So very seasoned player. Violet River's a newcomer. They have been playing for a couple years, mostly in ADV. So this is kind of a real picturesque clash of new versus old. So I'm going to go ahead and start the game one here. And we're going to see a Loom lead versus a Gliscor. So Loom lead could be a lot of things. It could be Sash, it could be Scarf, and Gliscor could be Sash U-turn, or it could be something along the lines of like Taunt, or like Taunt, U-turn, Rocks, Defensive. We see a Jira, and then we see a Mitar. So the first thing, we're really thinking here is like, oh, well, this could be like a mag offense. It could be a defensive mag team. It could be stall. We don't really know yet. But with george182's team is the trajectory is kind of clear. He's got a Scarf Loom lead. He's got a Me. He's got a T-Tar. Probably got a Zap. Probably has a second, third steal, or two steals, so like a Tran-Jira combo or a Scizor in the back. And then we're going to see an Abomasnow from Violet River. Okay, interesting. So for those of you who have been playing DPP for a while, Abomasnow every few years seems like it has like a resurgence where it's suddenly on a bunch of teams, and then it disappears again. And Abomasnow is good because Hail is incredibly annoying to so many Pokemon in DPP, specifically Steel types and T-Tar, because they usually are not going to get buffeted by Sand, but they will get buffeted by Hail, and that neutralizes their leftovers. Or if they don't have lefties, it gets rid of HP just on the flat. So we see Gliscor, we see Jira, we see Abomasnow. So what I'm thinking is this is more likely than not probably a sort of defensive team. We see Abomasnow, Jirachee, Gliscor, probably a Starmie in the back. Could be a Fortress, could be a Donphan, but there's 100% going to be a spinner there. As we see george182 go to Flygon. So, seeing as he has Scarf Loom, this could be a Mixgon, or it could be, okay, Fire Blast, definitely a Mixgon, in the Clef. So, right away, now that 4 Pokemon have been revealed on each side, I would guess it's going to probably be Zapdos, and probably Jirachee. Could be a second Scarfer, it could be Heatran, or I guess it could be like Scizor, but definitely Zapdos plus Steel, at least most likely. He needs a Breloom check, so Zapdos is like obligate here. And then here we see Clef, so this is a 100% defensive team. And his last is probably going to be Starmie / Donphan. It's going to be one of those bulkier spinners. And then probably some sort of speed control. I'm not going to speculate too much on it, but it's definitely going to be a spinner combination. So we see me come into Clef. It could be a Rotom. It could be for an anti-spin. And then we see a double back out to Loom on a T-Bolt, which I think I get what he's doing there. That T-Bolt would not really have dumped more than 50, and if it's defensive me, whatever, but I get the vision from George there, doubling the game momentum. So now he gets me in again on a Sleep Talk Jirachee with Iron Head. Okay, so most people will associate Jirachee with, unsurprisingly, Wish. Wish Jirachee is like the quintessential defensive Jira set, Wish Tech. People will run Sleep Talk on it, though, because Jirachee, in a physically defensive set, is one of the ways Stall has been innovated to counter Breloom. And a team where you have Clef, Abomasnow, probably defensive Gliscor, it doesn't have either Taunt or a move to hit Breloom. You want to have, at the very least, another check to Loom, and something that can take Spore and strike back, which maybe you wouldn't always expect. So that's why Sleep Talk Jirachee, it's usually Iron Head Fire Punch, has gotten really popular over the past couple years. By really popular, I mean you see it, more often than you used to, but it's a really interesting niche way that defensive teams have been able to evolve to take care of things like, these types of builds where there's stall. And having a Sleep Absorber on a defensive team is not something that you can always afford, if ever. So a dedicated Sleep Absorber is, huge. It used to be Gyarados back in the day. Nowadays, you don't really see defensive Gyarados that much anymore. Oh, and it's defensive. Okay, well, defensive me and a Body Slam Jira. So another little tidbit is defensive me also was extremely common. I would expect offensive on this team, but defensive me, bold me used to be really popular back in the day. I'm pretty sure that is a defensive star me, or at least it has some physical defensive investment, because that Body Slam is doing very little. But Bold Me was really good back in the day, because Bold Me was able to switch in on Pert, Hippo, Luke, various, sets, Bronzong, occasionally you could even take a thing like a Scarf Trend Explosion and recover. And here we see, oh man, so that's really tough. We see Gliscor roost up, so his last move is, I would guess it, I'm not 100% sure, but as lead, it's probably Taunt, but it could also be something like Knockoff or U-Turn. But we see me get hit with an Earthquake and die. So there is the Spinner, and there goes the Spinner, which is really, really tough because Abomasnow is now going to be taking a cord from Stealth Rock, and that puts immense pressure on the team here. And if George had, let's say, Spikes up, this would be even worse, because now it would chip Jira, etc., if he had a Spiker. But you can see how a Pokemon like Mixcon really threatens these structures, even with something like Abomasnow, which is kind of meant to counteract, Dragon types with Ice Shard. Even then, it's still, worried to death by Flygon. So we see a Focus Punch, and we see Leftover Zor. Focus Punch Abomasnow has been something that I've seen more often recently, because Abomasnow with Focus Punch is utilizing its Ice/Fight/ occasionally Ground Fire coverage and Grass coverage to punish Clef and T-Tar. Abomasnow can Focus Punch Clef, which expects it gets a free switch-in. It can also Focus Punch Tar, which expects it gets a free switch-in. Or Focus Punch a Roosting Skarm, which would traditionally be able to, completely wall physically inclined Abomasnow. So this is really doing from Violet River here is he's trying to infuse a sort of offensive element in his very defensively inclined stall team. We see it's a Calm Mind Clefable, at least I assume it's a Calm Mind, with T-Bolt Flamethrower, which is dropping Ice Beam because he already has the ice coverage on Abomasnow, for T-Bolt to remain for Gara, but Flamethrower for stuff like Scizor, which is actually really helpful here. And if the team gets a little... Oh, okay, well that's... Geez, that actually killed. That is shocking. That is a very, I'd say, physically inclined Mixstar, which we should have been able to tell from the 30% on the Gliscor. But Flamethrower, obviously, for the steel coverage. Basically, what you're seeing here is the interaction between different coverage choices on the team. For example, again, you have an Ice type, which is going to have probably Ice Shard, Wood Hammer as the last two moves. Potentially Protect, maybe even dropping Wood Hammer, but one of the main pluses of Abomasnow is that it can beat water types. Body Slam on Jira, so there's no Fire Punch, which is usually run on the Rest Talk set. You make up for it with Flamethrower on Clef, which helps beat things like defensive SD Scizor. Although, again, we're not seeing the team, being overly solid versus SD Scizor at any rate. There's Discharge, Para Clef. Clef does not get paired, or does not suffer from paralysis as a... actually, it doesn't preclude it from moving that turn ever in DPP, but it does still lower its speed. And then we see U-Turn on Gliscor. So all the moves are revealed, and he's going to go back to Clef, which is taking a pretty hefty amount. You can really see how, not fragile, but how easily discernible a Phys-Def Calm Mind Clef is from a Spadef Clef in DPP. And we just see a pivot back to Gliscor, and discharge. This is not looking great for Violet River. So what you're going to probably see here is a bunch of these pivot-type turns where we're going to see him pivot between Gliscor and Clef in an attempt to stall out at least some of Zapdos' moves, which it can readily do, but at a... Okay, so it's Toxic, so Gliscor actually is kind of fine versus this, but which he can readily stall out, but without rocks on the field consistently, and with, this really strong Tar being able to pressure Violet River's team quite well, it it really does become an issue, because if Violet River can't keep rocks up, that Tar is never getting shipped. And overall, this becomes a game where, even though it's a stall team, its defensive backbone is just simply not good enough to give it the longevity against Pokemon like Roost, Zapdos, Recover Me, and, while not defensive Tar, a T-Tar, which has the ability to switch moves, and additionally is probably at least somewhat invested in HP. We're going to see Zapdos, again, just discharging Clef. George182 is doing a great job at PP management here. For one, he's not threatened by Ice Beam immediately, so he can stay in and fire off discharges and, just blanket attempt to get a crit and drain those soft-boiled. So Clef now is at 50% of the soft-boiled. It only has 8 left, and that T-Tar is, while getting shipped by rocks this turn, not in any dire straits. And we see Starmie come in. It's going to do the same thing, just spin away these hazards. Violet River should probably start, staying in on the U-turn. Not going to do very much. That might not actually be fully defensive Starmie, but I feel like it has to have some investment here or there. We see a T-Bolt. George182 is letting that Starmie get a little bit low. This is... Okay, so he... Oh, jeez, it did a lot. Clef is also walled by Flygon, and we see him Flamethrower instead of just roosting, which I guess... I understand, because he expected Flygon to roost there. But again, Clef loses another soft-boiled. Bliss comes in and goes for a crunch. Okay, so... At this point, I'm going to pause for a second and just say, here you see an example of where a few incremental choices can change the game. In letting Starmie take U-turn, it cannot switch in hard on Gliscor anymore. That U-turn plus T-Bolt Clef combo is really keeping me under pressure. More pressure than George should probably allow it to be under. Now, if that Flygon does not have Roost, if Flygon had Roost, I would say this game is open and shut, because that Flygon could just Earthquake, Earthquake, Earthquake that Clef, Draco Gliscor with no fear, Earthquake that Jirachee, as long as it's somewhat in range of a Life Orb EQ, and that'd be game. So, the last move on Flygon, if it's not Roost, which I think he would have roosted on Clef pretty easily, is going to probably be either Outrage for attacks Mixed Gone, Stone Edge, or Toxic. People have been moving away from Roost on Flygon as the last move. Why? Because of situations exactly like this, where you're facing a defensive team, where you've already Dracoed, and now you're at -2, and Earthquake just doesn't do enough to Clefable to kill it. You Outrage it and take it out the field. So, my guess is George is running something similar to that. And this Scizor is not going to outright be able to beat Clefable either, because it's not Superpower, it's U-turn, and that Flamethrower is going to be 2 KOing it. So, we see a U-turn into Clef, which is, again, insane to see Clef as a Scizor counter, but now this Clef is really putting pressure on George. He can... Functionally, this T-Tar is getting really low. With rocks up, it's not able to effectively beat Clef. And we see a Custap, and we see a Crunch, and we see a Soft-Boiled. I guess he was expecting Pursuit there. I'm guessing his last is probably Superpower, not Suit. If you're running Crunch, Pursuit, or if you're running Fire Blast Rocks, you're usually running Superpower last. And now we see Gliss come in again, and the win con really becomes Scizor. We're going to see a Roost from George there. I would U-turn if I were George here, because he's going to go to Clef, and if you get... Okay, that's... Actually, you're right, he's Parrot, so you can just S the U-turn with absolutely no repercussions. So, he's going to U-turn. I would Flamethrower, or actually, I would Soft-Boiled there, like Violet River did. And now we see a Skarm. Okay, so... Skarm is going to take that Superpower really easily, pivot back to Gliscor? I don't get that. The reason why... Yeah, that doesn't make much sense. I understand what he might have been trying to do there, but there was no reason why you wouldn't go to Gliscor there. You know he has Fire Blast. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I think what he might have been trying to do is go for either just a Roost, expecting Fire Blast to do not much to Skarm because it is a mostly physically invested T-Tar. Or he could have just been trying to get a spike there to totally block the spin. But really, you can play the same game and just go to Gliscor. So that was an interesting play. By interesting, I mean not the really ideal play there, but Clefable can still win. Clef is at 100, and Breloom is going to have a difficult time breaking through Gliscor and Jirachee when it's probably a Jolly Scarf nature. So Gliscor can still put up a really good fight here. We see Flygon coming in on the Quake. I think I would have just roosted there. And now we see a roost from Flygon, which makes me wonder because I don't think he had to let it get that low. We see Clef Calm Mind up though, only 5 soft boileds left. We see me come in on a Calm Mind, and I mean, you have no choice but to spin here, which is certainly going to benefit George because he can scare this Clefable out at least once with Breloom. But you see, you know, kind of the issue here. I don't feel like the offensive management on George's side was great. And that's why you also should have roosted with Gliscor. I understand, again, you know, Clef probably lives that, but you're still going to be scared out anyway. I don't... This is a... Yeah, and Draco's going to do a huge amount to that. So, Gliscor is, I guess, going to just try and stall out everything, but it really can't do that at this point. George can... Okay, well, that's going to expedite the conclusion of this game. Scizor would have won anyway, but, you know, I think that this is a case in point of, you know, kind of just mismanagement of, you know, this game did not need to go the way it did. Basically, you know, you saw over and over and over kind of an over or an underestimation of how each player was managing their resources. So, for example, not roosting with Flygon earlier, what if Violet River U-turned? You know, that would have gone out, and that would have been a huge momentum kill for George. Not swapping out, at the very least, you know, or roosting on the C-Bomb. You know, it's Scarf, roost there is fine. Roosting, U-turning, rocking again is a fine line there to play. Same idea with not swapping out Clef in Sewer Power. You know, that's something you should probably calc, you know, to make sure of. But of course, you know, these things do happen, but this is, you know, a example of where each player at each point had an advantage, but they let their opponent have an out. And just a clear reason why you, I guess, can't let that happen. I don't really have too much extra to say. I think the teams are interesting, but this is, again, really showing you the delinquencies of Hailstall, because the team had difficulty remaining afloat because its defensive backbone was not there, and Abomasnow, even though sometimes it can be amazing in matchups, and really it did have a decent chance to be good here because you have Starmie, Flygon, and T-Tar, which it might be outspeeding. You know, its weakness to rocks and weaknesses to so many offensive types just keeps it unable to sustain itself. And its kind of shoddy defenses when it goes offensive were really demonstrated by that crunch killing it. So this is why generally Hailstall is seen as a matchup pick, and here it just did not work out. I think Violet River could have won, but ultimately just misplayed his cards in the end. So we're going to now, I'm just going to swap again so we're on the same side, go to game 2, and we see an Infernape versus Roserade lead, and then we see a swap to Hippo. So right away, oh, and a sub. Interesting. Sub lefties. All right, this is going to have Wisp. Oh, okay. Sub into Grass Knot into Spadef Hippo Rocks. Okay, so that's an interesting set from Violet River. Sub lead lefties Ape. You know, lead Ape is good because it can, you know, turn 1, it has a good matchup against a lot of leads. But right away, I mean, we see defensive team from George, and we see that this lead Ape has not actually done that much. The caveat with running Infernape is you can either be super strong, or you can have no longevity, or you can be quite weak, but have a longer duration in the game. And here's a prime example of where you see that trade-off. Ape has pretty solid offensive stats, but if you're not running Band or Orb or Belt, you know, those offensive stats are not quite strong enough to break stall on its own merit without hazards late game. And that's why a set like this might actually do better later in the game, because while it might be good to surprise, certain teams. When you're running into stall, which has this hardcore Spadef Hippo and a Latias, this ape is going to get, look, Violet River got rocks up. Hippo is a little weakened, but not sufficiently. And that ape basically ended up doing nothing. And now Violet River's team is kind of on the backbone, because that rocks is going to be... I mean, he has, it's early game rocks versus no rocks and a defense versus offensive matchup, and he already lost Zelf, and Reflect is still up for another turn. So he's probably going to return to, okay, and again, even worse, because now you see that he probably does not have a spinner. I would maybe put Donphan on this team. This would actually be a good time for a Donphan, or a type of spinner. You see Garrett come in, take a quarter from health, and Violet River is going to try and DD and get blown back by Thunder. Through para crit is really unfortunate. That's definitely not what you want to see. But this now, this is very biased for Violet River. Probably going to see a hard swap out here from Lottie. Yep, into Jira. 39, that's probably Scarf Soar into Ape, but the thing is, Ape is really going to struggle to do any sort of breaking here. Sub is an interesting move on Ape here because you can kind of force yourself into Blaze range and power up your... Oh, geez. Okay, so that's banned? Okay, that's probably banned in Fizdef Jirachee. You can power up your Blaze, and then Fire Blast has no difficulty killing things like Spadef Jira, but it comes at the cost of lacking power or a pivot move like U-turn, which is excellent for hitting Latias. We see Titar come in, go for a DD, and kill Jira. Okay, so Violet River is still in it. This is a team which is, I think, derivative of an old BKC team. Not as in it's like a copy, but it's the same idea of a Roserade Hippo Clef balance in the modern age. We don't see a spinner from george182 yet. He might not even have one or might not need one. His last could be a lot of things. Seeing he has Roserade, he might have a T-Spikes balance benefactor, if that's Ironhead Thunder Jira with Fizdef. Maybe Wish Tect, which probably does benefit a decent amount from T-Spikes. His team does look a bit susceptible to Skarm, but I guess that's what Thunder is for. His last could be a lot of things, and this Titar is going to be able to... Yeah, that's Spadef Hippo, so it's not going to be able to just slack off those crunches. We're going to see a... Okay, so this is probably Scarf Raid. Yep, okay, so lead Scarf Raid. Makes it interesting he doesn't have a spinner, because Subzap with Scarf Raid... Oh, wait, what? Hold on, wait, did I not see that right? Wait, what? I'm going to go back, because... Wow, so... If you're looking at this, that's actually Black Sludge Roserade. I don't know if I was missing something there, but that Titar got outsped by a max speed 306 Rose. That is, that's not ideal. The reason why, the thing is, that can't even be... What I'm guessing is that's probably an ADV-esque set Titar, where it's probably just hitting 300 speed. In this way, I guess it can run Adamant and be really strong, and also have HP so it can live things like a Hippo Earthquake. I guess, that actually does make sense defensively, because 53 is a very low roll from Earthquake. That's something that we probably should have picked up on there. But we see a Rotom last, which is the anti-spinner, and we see Violet River still manages to bring it out. I actually don't dislike the team that he's running here that much. I think late game Zelf is a really choice pick, along with what I'm guessing is that's going to be probably Scarf Tom, maybe modest Scarf Tom, because Shadow Ball killing a 252 Laddie from 57 has to be a roll. So it's either modest Scarf or that could be just a really fast. Actually, it's probably Scarf. It's probably Scarf, because that might be Scarf Rotom on George's side. But, interesting game. Once again, we see an offense versus defense matchup, and we see Violet River really making some select choices with his teams. That Titar did indeed end up just getting outsped and blown out by Rose, but it lived in Earthquake quite comfortably from the Hippowdon. And that is certainly going to have a benefit in some matchups. I would probably opt, though, for, if you're running a set like that, Ice Punch or Aqua Tail, because that way you actually have the benefit of being able to KO a Powdon with, let's say, an Adamant, Ice Punch, Aqua Tail, or, maybe even Crunch. Sometimes if it's, purely Spadef, but I think that's a place where you should be running Ice Punch, to your benefit, because that way you can actually bear the fruit of living a thing like a Scarfgon EQ and killing it back, 100% of the time. Same thing with Gliscor, same thing with, as you saw here, Powdon. But we're going to go ahead and run into Game 3. I do wonder what these players are going to break out this time. We're going to see an Uxie, whatever, versus Zap into a Pert immediately, into a Trick Scarf scenario where we're going to probably see rocks on both sides go up, and we're going to see a Fly-On. So we're also going to see a T-Wave. So, right away we see, what I'm going to guess is this has become a common structure in DPP. Void was using a team quite similar to this in SPL one week. Zapdos, probably offensive. Pert could be Waterfall, physically inclined. Probably, I would guess it's probably a physically offensive Pert, but it could also be a defensive standard Earthquake, Ice Beam / Vortect. And then with U-turn damage, probably a Scarfgon into Rose. Okay, so now this is making me think of the BKC build, and we see Poison Point to block the Spore, where it's going to be, Jira, and then last, probably Starmie. I think George182 has actually used this team in other games too, but that Jira is going to take a solid chunk from what's probably a Specs Lati Draco into Rose, back into Uxie, whatever, to block an HP Ground, which is possible. We see a Sleep Powder, and we're probably going to see a Hazard go up here. So that T-Spikes. Looking at Violet River's team, Specs Lati, Undetermined Transet, probably not Scarf if he swapped out of Rose there. So this is probably either, it could be Life Orb, it could be just Pasho for attacks, it could be Magma Storm. Probably going to see a T-Tar to suit on Violet River's team, or a DD-Tar. Looking at the build here, he probably would appreciate, this could also be like a Combine Coon build, or something along the lines of like a Rotom Special Spam. That's basically what I'm seeing so far. Rose is going to go down, but it's already got the one layer of T-Spikes up, which is going to be beneficial. If Violet River even has remotely a T-Tar or something along the lines, that T-Spike is going to be immensely helpful. We see Zap going to be able to take out the Uxie here. T-Bolt's going to kill it, as we see Violet River probably go back to Specs Lati. And just fire off another Draco into a Protect. So Protect Zapdos is really cool, and I actually imagine it probably enables it to almost 100% live Draco Meteor from Specs Lati here. Protect Zapdos is interesting for a couple reasons. One, this Protect Zapdos probably has some speed investment, so it's not like going to be 0 speed, Protect, full on defensive. We saw that because it outsped Uxie, which had a Trick Scarf, and Uxie is at least going to run a little bit of speed on those types of sets, probably like 264 to outspeed Arrow. Now, Protect Zapdos, one, you can see it's going to probably live Draco from the 94% health it's going to get to, and also it PP stalls 2 Draco Meteors. So Zapdos has pressure, and something I think that is really, really underrated in DPP, you see it a lot in ADV, but not so much in Gen 4, is strategies that revolve around pressure stall. Now, of course, it's a little worse than an ADV because Rest and, Protect, Zap, Moltres, Coon are less common, but you still see it sometimes. And Protect Zapdos is able to not only scout, which is the obvious role it has. Let's say scouting a Scarftar Stone Edge, or scouting a double. Some people will try and pressure Zapdos doubly with rocks by using double switches, and Zapdos with Protect obviously blocks that. But it also, is a good scout, or a great way to stall your opponent out of moves like Draco Meteor. Look, he just Dracoed again. Zapdos went for a Roost. It's at 53. It's probably EV to live Draco at full. And Latias now has 2 Dracos. It can only Draco on Zapdos one more time. And Protect is going to scout for Explosion here too. And if he has Fire Blast or Magma Storm, that's going to take away 2 PP from that. And that is huge. We do see Magma Storm manage to connect with Zap here. And we're probably going to see a straight out Roost. Trying to block a potential Explosion. This is just another reason. Like, with that Tect, he can Protect here and fully stall out Magma Storm and block Protect. Like, this is This is why Protect Zapdos is actually so good in scenarios like these, because by forcing the Heatran to waste its Fire Blast PP, if it uses all of its Fire Blasts / Magma Storms, whatever offensive move it has, same thing with Lottie really, it's going to be forced to explode. And when you have Protect, if you play your turns right, you can still bait that explosion at 0 cost to yourself. And that's really, really good playing from George there. He played that perfectly. He goes to Life Orb, Flygon here, Violet River. And he's going to Draco Meteor and finally kill the Zapdos, but not without it beating Heatran and depleting Latias of most of its Draco Meteors. So we see 4 attacks Mixcon here versus what's probably a Scarf Tom. Zapdos Snow Spinner is a little interesting. I know you don't need Spinner with Zapdos. I just feel like they go Zap Me together so well. This is probably it actually might not be a Scarf Tom. This could be a Colbur Rotom. It could also be sub Pain Split. I wouldn't be surprised. We're gonna see so there's T-Bolt. So this could be Colbur. It could be Expert Belt. It could be Metronome. I've been using Metronome lately on a ladder. And we're just going to see it take that Empoleon out, which expected to set up on it. So Violet River was really tempted there to just try and go for game on that Shadow Ball. But, I think that this is a reason, why you should really be taking into account, what your opponent's team construction is. We saw that U-turn on Flygon almost certainly be a Scarfgon. Now, there are 2 possible outcomes there, and that is that either that Flygon and Rotom are both Scarf, and this is a team which is really going all in on offense, attempting to just punish setup from Gara, Tar, D-Knight, or it could be that paired with Zapdos, we see a Rotom which is not just trying to double Scarf out offense, but also trying to lure T-Tar with a Colbur Berry or a Metronome or Rain Dance set, something along those lines. Because Rain Dance Rotom would actually be kind of interesting here. Back in the day, BKC used to use a team with Rain Dance Colbur Rotom, which was effectively used to learn things like T-Tar and do an extreme amount of damage to it, Pump, Thunder, and also just reset weather. And when you have Pokemon like Zapdos who Protect, with Zapdos' leftovers not negated by by sand, the longevity of Zapdos just becomes even more, ridiculous. And versus teams like Violet Rivers, which have a lot of moves with very low PP, like Draco, Magma Storm, which it kind of, and probably Hydro Pump, which it relies on spamming, that Zapdos with Protect becomes even better without sand. So this could be a Rain Dance Rotom, Rain Dance or Colbur. We see Flygon, obviously now revealed to be Scarf, come in, Outrage, and then we see a crit on Flygon. So this could be Kustap as well. So we're going to see if this is Kustap Rotom, which it is not, and Violet River is going to come out on top. So that was really a roller coaster back and forth game. George182 in the battle chat, which I have omitted here, says that he should not have sacked Swampert, which I do not disagree with. I do, however, think that this was, this is one of those, he just got unlucky. I don't think it was necessary to keep Pert. He could not have foreseen the Shadow Ball. Really, this is just another example of one of those games where you want to take stock of your options as much as possible. Now, I'm not going to go out and critique the players here. I think maybe there's a chance that I would have saved Zapdos and swapped it out of Flygon on that Draco Meteor. But that's, again, just hindsight. And I think George, especially in the Tran Laddie sequence, played that Zapdos extremely well. And here you see a type of team which is attempting to deviate from the norm of using Zapdos, Roserade type of hazard stack without a spinner like Starmie. Instead, you have Rotom in the slot where you would usually see a Starmie, in this case. Or maybe not necessarily see a Starmie, but there's no spinner here. And that Rotom might be, again, it could be sub-Colbur, it could just be Colbur, it could be Colbur's Pain Split. There's a lot of options for George to use here. It could even be HP Grass. I've seen people use Belt Rotom, like Piteous recently. But, overall, like, this is a team which tries to go for a mix-up with a sort of, defensive backbone, but, we see probably an Ironhead Thunder Jirachee or an Ironhead Protect 3 attacks Jirachee here. And again, like, I really do like George's team. I think it's a spin on the team BKC used in SPL. I don't recall if BKC used Protect Zapdos, but he used Protect Starmie to evade T-Tar. But, overall, like, this is a interesting game, if not only for the team choice. What I really have been liking about this tournament, and I'll go a bit in depth in the post-facto commentary here, is that players are not afraid to use some, even if they appear very superficially standard, quite innovative sets. Like Protect Zapdos, you might think, oh, well, like, it's a move that has the ability to waste a turn, and Zapdos has pressure. Of course it's using Protect, that's obvious. I have never really seen Protect Zapdos in SPL before, or a high-level tournament. And these tournaments are often kind of like a breeding ground or a test tube for strategies which will be picked up on in more official, bigger, trophy-worthy tournaments during the tournament cycle in the year. Now, again, interesting team from Violet 2. I think that the Specs Lottie special spam Mixgon type of strategy here is interesting. A lot of people I've seen this tournament have been going for this dual dragon appeal where it's 2 offensive dragons, special spam. Heatran is probably meant to trap Fable for Empoleon, and the Uxie is going to trick something early and T-Wave. That way it can maybe screw over something bulky like it did here, like a Swampert or a Spadef Jira or a Powdon. But, this was an example of 2 teams which I thought were, pretty innovative within a already kind of established structure. Like Trick Scarf Uxie offense has been a thing for about 10 years now. There was a team that I think Bada Bing had back in the day, which was quite similar to this actually, which utilized Trick Scarf Uxie, Mixgon, Civitar Tran, Rotom on an offense. I think it had Scizor over Emp. To kind of cripple defensive backbone teams, because Uxie can trick and rock, which is a really beneficial combo. And then you saw on George's side kind of a innovative take on what is, the standard typical T-Spikes balance. Where instead of, Starmie, Spin, Longevity, or things like Coon, Specs Lottie, you have a Protect defensive Zapdos, probably a Calm Mind or a 3-attack Shira, and then a Rotom of unknown origin, which could be Sub, Magnet, again, it could be so many different things. But my guess here is it's something which is going to aid in Zapdos really kind of coming out on top, because that, again, Protect Weather Change would be really, really nasty. But anyway, this was a good series, and I'm glad I got to commentate it because George is also a co-commentator, so I wanted to alleviate him of that responsibility of commentating his own game. Because I remember when I used to commentate my own replays, it was always frustrating to commentate a game where I lost or, maybe I made a mistake. But again, this was a worthy series, and I think Violet River is going to continue to show innovations. Now, whether they're good or not, like the Sub-Ape, to be decided, but I am always really glad to see players who are either like George, been around for a while, bringing some old school knowledge back, and players like Violet River, which are new and not really associated with DPP, coming into the fray and bringing strategies and Pokemon and sets and ideas that are transposed from one generation to the next. That's something which I think is really cool about tournaments like this, because you have the ability in play-ins to get a bunch of players who typically wouldn't be considered for SPL slot able to show their stuff. So anyway, guys, thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next one. So again, comment if you have any questions, etc. Don't feel afraid to reach out if you want to know anything about DPP, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.